One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's live episode. It is November 30th, 2012, and tonight I have a very special guest on. My guest tonight is a lady that you've all heard before on the broadcast multiple times. She is a very close friend of mine, and she's very near and dear to my heart, and she's a very intelligent lady. And I've got her for 2 hours tonight, and I'm going to give her as much time as she needs to talk about what's been going on, recent updates. She was the girlfriend of Lee Harvey Oswald. She was a researcher in her own right, scientist. She still is. She's very smart. Doesn't mean just because the things she's been through and been banned from by the powers that shouldn't be doesn't mean she's not a scientist. She still has a very analytical mind. And I am pleased to bring her on live tonight. Normally it's very cloak and daggerish, but because she is on a book tour, I am able to actually get her on the broadcast live to be able to talk to her. And I'm just super excited about it, so I don't want to waste any more time. I want to introduce her. Let me welcome back to the broadcast, Judyth Vary Baker. Judyth, welcome back, my dear.
Well, hi, Popeye. It's great to hear your voice again, and all those fine people out there. They're listening to the right show.
How have you been? How are things going? I'm just so surprised that you're actually able to have a book tour. You know, compared to when I first started talking to you, it's huge. How are things going? I'm so excited for you.
Well, how this happened is rather cloak and dagger in a way, actually, if you'd like to hear about it.
Sure.
What happened is that I had received several threats about not coming to Dallas after all of it. I had planned in 2013. We had even formed an Occupy Dallas organization. It has a lot of members. People say, "Go, Judy, go! You know, get there." But here's what happened: I received a telephone call when I was over in Europe, in a place where nobody should have known where I was. I was at a friend's house. The telephone call came, and in that call, the person said on the other end, a male voice said, "If you go to Dallas, you're going to pay," just like that. Well, having been warned previously on other occasions and then ended up in the hospital, I decided, okay, that does it. I canceled the reservation I'd made for the hotel in Dallas, okay? And originally I was going to be there in 2012. I was never going to be on TV or radio or anything like that, but just to have people come to my little hotel room and I would talk to them. Well, they did. The minute I say that I made this reservation, within 24 hours I got this call. And it really upset me, but I canceled, okay? And I put it on Facebook to everybody. And, Popeye, you may have seen it there. Now, I got this, this threat, and I'm not going to go to Dallas after all. And so, 750 people or so saw it, and who knows, about 15,000 if they passed it on to others, things like that, because I don't let everybody be my Facebook friend. Now, what happens next? 2 or 3 days after that, my bank account gets hacked into, and all the charges are from Houston and Dallas. And, and that made me so angry. Eventually my bank, repaid me. They didn't catch the person who did it.
You think that was a message, like, because of where they were coming from?
I mean, all places. You can get your bank account hacked, but you're not going to get. You can maybe get charges in Indonesia, or you're going to get one over in Chicago, or who knows where. To have it only from Houston, where I used to live 18 years, and then Dallas, and these charges were to gas stations and eateries and things like that. There were 6 or 7 charges just from gas stations in Dallas. It just, and that made me angry. I realized that I'm sure they were connected. Everybody believes that they were, because they said if you go to Dallas, you'll pay. And I did pay. My bank account was getting empty. And, anyway, I don't have very much money. So, this was serious for me. And so I contacted my publisher, and I said, I just got a donation. It wasn't for too much, but it was enough to get me out of the country. And I said, let's do something, because if it's like this in 2012, what in the world, how am I ever going to be able to speak out in 2013? I said, let's educate the people this year, so when they hear the lies next year, they can boo them down, So that's how it started. Oh, my gosh, the response has been incredible. Oh, Popeye, the people have come up with tears in their eyes after they heard the truth about Lee. I've been showing presentations on the screen. They've seen the pictures. I've shown them how for example, Lee's, this smirk, when you blow it up, you can see it was retouched. And I'd have a photo showing him from the same moment from another direction, because they were taking so many pictures, where there is no smirk. That's the one that, of course, didn't make it to the newspapers. And people seeing that with their own eyes. See, I know what he looked like, and I know who he was, and that the smirk is so ridiculous. When you blow it up, it's the most common one you see of him besides his arrest photo. It's the one where he's standing there and he looks like he's grinning. You blow it up and you can see the downturn of his mouth when you blow it up. And then the black that they put making his mouth smirk upwards. Nobody has double crease in the corners of their mouth, one going down, one going up. And on top of that, you can see a drop of white out, on this thing when it's blown up. It's gross. And I tell the people, I used to work at Steck Von Publishing in the early 60s and mid-60s, 65, 66, 77 in there. And as an artist there, I retouched photos all the time, so I knew when it was being retouched. And I showed them retouched and unretouched photos of that time. How, they made Lee's chin look square, so it matched up with the backyard photos. Then I showed pictures of him for TV that they couldn't retouch, from the midnight conference where he talked to people, and the reporters and everything. There his chin is nice and pointed, it's not the same chin at all. And on I have shown, usually it's an hour-and-a-half presentation I gave, and at the end, oh my gosh, the people can swarm up there and just, they're just completely amazed at how he was framed and how consistently he was framed, And if you'd like, I'd like to tell you about some of the ways he was framed that we haven't mentioned before.
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right. Well, for example, I tell them, I don't have the presentation in front of me, I can't do the quotes precisely. But, for example, there's a sniper's map. Have you heard about the sniper's map?
No, I didn't. I've heard about the sniper's nest.
All right. The sniper's map was supposedly found by, you have Curry and others saying, we have found this map. We found it in his room. And this is on the 25th of November. Lee is dead. He can't defend himself, all right? The 25th of November, and it is in the New York Times, all right? We have found a map that shows that he drew lines from the Texas School Book Depository out toward Dealey Plaza, where Kennedy was. That we see the lines drawn there, and also two other lines from other sources. Like if he'd been at two other places he could have shot from. Okay, that's on the 25th of November, and then buried deep in that was in the New York Times, very deep in a different newspaper, all right, you find on November 27th, 2 days later, police were told today that the Dallas officials said there was no such map. But people don't see that. They only know that Lee Oswald drew a map. See, all the prejudice is built up on the front page, and, they take it away on the back page. So this kind of prejudice was built up. The other, I'm sure you heard about that this cold-blooded killer, sat in the sniper's nest, and he was chewing on a chicken sandwich and drinking a pop, and he's waiting to kill the president. I mean, that's just cold-blooded. They wanted to pump Lee's stomach to see what was in his stomach. Okay, turned out, of course, that Bonnie Ray Williams was actually in that so-called sniper's nest, and he was there until only 16 minutes before the assassination. Now, what do we have? We have Lee Oswald watching until he leaves so he can slide into place in there. How come Bonnie Ray Williams saw nobody? But let's not go there. But what's interesting is that later, of course, it was in the newspapers that Lee Oswald was drinking the pop and eating the sandwich. And again, it's buried way in the back page when they find out who really did it. So this is a consistent thing they're doing. The third is about the sniper's nest itself. They show photographs of it, and it says in the Warren Commission clearly that Lee Oswald built the sniper's nest. In the 26 volumes of the Warren Commission's reports, all right, you find that the FBI found out that the employees of the Texas School Book Depository built that themselves so they'd have a place to sneak to, fool around, rest, and not be seen, eat their lunch without being seen, and so on.
And let's not forget
place where they all came. So how are you going to use the sniper's nest to go and have somebody going in there when they were always using it, okay, to hide in and stuff?
Well, and let's not forget Mac Wallace's magic fingerprint that was disappeared that they found on one of the boxes in the sniper's nest. And if people don't know who Mac Wallace is, he was a thug for LBJ. You can go look that up. But just more proof that Lee would construct this thing himself and then shoot Kennedy.
It turns out he didn't, yeah.
And as I said before,
in the same Warren Commission reports. Can you imagine? Saying the Warren Commission saying he built it, and then further down the FBI saying they, talked to employees and they built it. And so you know what John McAdams and all those people say? They say, "Well, we don't care who built it; he used it." That's what they say.
Right, he used it. All I'll say to that is I know Kennedy was shot multiple times, and he probably would have died from the wound to his throat and everything. But the kill shot that you see in the Zapruder film, whether or not it was altered or not, the kill shot you see comes from the front. You can clearly see where it comes from. Plenty of witnesses said that it came from the front. Well, Lee wasn't in front of Kennedy. So what did he shoot the bullet? It was a boomerang bullet. It went around, came up through the grassy knoll, made a puff of smoke.
Oh, that is really a magic bullet now, isn't it? We've got two of them, don't we? See? Yeah. So this thing about how they framed Lee, I mean, it goes on and on and on to add. And didn't I tell you before in an earlier thing about the lineups, the first two lineups that Lee was in?
We went into it a little bit. If you want, we can go over it again.
Well, did I tell you how they were told to tell their names?
Oh, no.
All right. Well, we've got some reputable. They've gone into the records closely. First of all, the lineups, as you know, there were room for 6 people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but they only bring out 3 to stand with Lee Oswald. lowering his chances of escaping without, you know what I mean? By chance, 25% would pick him, you know, just by chance, if they all look the same or close. But in fact, they don't look nearly the same. Like one of these people, he's a lot older than Lee Oswald. He weighs 177 pounds. Lee weighs 131 pounds. He's really thin. He'd lost about 15 pounds since I saw him on that very lean and wiry body. That was a big loss. Anyway, you've got these three men here, and we looked into it deeply. I have, and they show them dressed in suits. Well, they weren't for the lineup. One was dressed actually with a red vest and in his dress pants, you know, for work pants. I mean, these are office pants, and he's got a nice shirt on, okay? The next one has a white shirt on, and he's wearing a nice jacket, okay, and he's got his work pants. The third one is wearing just a nice shirt and nice work, when I say work, I mean official. They look really nice because all the three of these men are working in the police department, all right? And Lee Oswald is standing with them with his ripped brown shirt on and the rumpled T-shirt, and his face is all beat up, you know. And there's scuffle marks all over his black pants. That's what you've got. Gee, which one shot at Officer Tippit? That's what these first two lineups are about. Popeye, here's what they did. The records show that they would have them stand forward and tell their name and where they worked. So I'm going to make up the names because I don't have the files here with me, but it was like this. My name is ABC, and I work for the Dallas Police Department. And he steps back. Got that? Now, people are watching this lineup to see who might have killed Officer Tippit. So now we have that's a police officer stand forward, and he says, he's a detective. All right, the second one stands forward, and he says, I'm going to put them in order, like it was. My name is Lee Harvey Oswald. I work in the Texas School Book Depository. Got it? Now, when he says that, everybody thinks this. Gee, that's the name that's in all the papers. Gee, that's where they said the shots came from. I mean, this man is forced to tell where he worked and what his name is. He steps back. Number 3 steps forward, and he says, my name is ABC or whatever it was, and I work for the Dallas Police Department. You hear that? He steps back. The fourth and last contestant to see who doesn't resemble in the slightest Lee Oswald at all. He's got a fat face and everything. He steps forward. He says, I'm the jail clerk for the Dallas Police Department, and my name is so-and-so, and he steps back. I ask you, would they have any difficulty choosing from among 3 people who work for the Dallas Police and this man who works in the Texas School Book Depository that's in all the papers? Even so, one of those guys, that was one of the witnesses there, said he didn't recognize Lee Oswald in these rigged, because there were 4 of these lineups, all right, altogether. And they got worse. Lee is asking, please, can I at least have a jacket on? Because he's in a T-shirt. When they even take a shirt away from him for the last lineup, and he's asking for a jacket. And all these kids are with him. They're teenagers. They're all in their... Anyway, they're dressed differently than he. And he says, what are you doing? He said, he complained to the police. He said, what are you doing to me? Does this mean I'm going to, this way, if I don't have a jacket on or anything like that, I'm going to stand out. Is that what you want me to do? And they said, yes. We got that on tape, So anyway, the fellow who said, well, I don't recognize him, he goes home and he gets shot in the head. A couple of weeks later, when the FBI, you could look up the date exactly, but they interview him again. By the time they interview him again, he recognizes Lee Oswald. Wonder why? And then
he was the one that got shot in the head and survived, right?
Yes, that's right. He survived. So they go and re-interview him. By then, he recognizes Lee Oswald. He's not going to say he doesn't recognize him, And then, of course, what's her name? She was saying, she said she was trying to talk to Tippit, and he was gurgling for 20 minutes or whatever. When we know that the ambulance came right away. Anyway, she's a very well, I'll put it this way. This is a witness that should never have been called to identify anyone, because there were those who saw two people, shooting Lee. Shooting Tippit. They never were called, as a witness, but this woman is. And so she says, I don't recognize anybody, sir, like that. And they say, hey, what about number 2 there? What about number 2? Oh, yes, there he is. I remember that mean look on his face. Okay, so it's like, you have this kind of thing going on.
Well, they framed the whole thing, obviously. I mean, you said.
That may have been blood. So you have to go and actually look at all the transcripts. I'm kind of really compressing things and
no, but I mean, just with the lineup alone, you can see how they did it, Judyth. I mean, look, you have 3 people that work for the police department at Lee.
Yeah.
And where like you said, where is he supposed to say that he works? Oh, I work in the Texas School Book Depository. Hey, isn't that where the killer of the president was supposedly shooting from? I wonder if this guy's the killer of the president. He's probably a cop killer too. Those other people work for the police department. I can't see them being cop killers. It must be this guy. And then bam, now their opinions actually been formed for them without them even realizing it.
Yeah, and these are simple people. They're not sophisticated. They trust the police. They trust what's been given them. They're not thinking, hey, why are we having 3 policemen standing up there, but policemen don't shoot policemen, do they? Do they? So you've got that kind of thing going on. And I've got, maybe I can find it. I hope I can. I'm looking at some of mine.
Well, you even say in your book that Lee knew, and I've asked you about this before, that Lee knew that he was going to be set up as the fall guy. And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know Judyth's book, if you're a new listener, you need to get her book, meandlee.com. You can purchase her book, meandlee.com. I promise you, it's exciting. The book reads like a Hollywood movie, but it's real.
Yeah, it is. And, people need to know the truth. And once they learn, you'd be surprised how they become dedicated to helping, to get the word out to what Lee Oswald was really about. It makes all the difference. It really does, when you know what he really went through. And he sacrificed his life. It's really hard. In 1999, Popeye, I don't know whether I mentioned this before, when I spoke out in 1999 and said that Lee Oswald saved Kennedy's life, people were shocked, and it's just like, are you kidding? All the things.
I know you caught a ton of flack over it. I'm going to cut us off, Judyth, because we got the bottom of the hour break coming up. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. Judyth is going to be back with me in just a few short minutes. That's right, we are live tonight. Judyth is joining us live. Go to meandlee.com and purchase her book. I promise you will not be disappointed with the information she brings forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. And before we were interrupted by the break, Judyth and I were discussing the framing of Lee Harvey Oswald. And when I mean, it was a big frame-up. And as I said, Lee knew about it earlier than the day of the shooting and, obviously the aftermath up until his death. He already knew it. He had mentioned it to Judyth. You have to read her book, meandlee.com. I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed. And then as kind of a compendium, a companion to it, you'll end up reading Dr. Mary's Monkey by Ed Haslam. And I'm going to tell you what, when you read Ed's book, the two of them together are like a 1-2 punch. You'll never look at history the same way again, I promise you. The Kennedy assassination, vaccines, cancer research, nothing you will ever look at the same way again. So go start with Judyth's book and then pick up Dr. Mary's Monkey afterwards. And it not only does Ed's book take you off a little more into the research that Judyth was involved with, but it also verifies everything that Judyth talks about. So I promise you won't be disappointed. Getting back into it, Judyth, I know you had something you wanted to read, and then... and of course I want to get into the cancer material, of course, too, but people need to know how the misreporting that went on the day of the assassination confused people, and of course made them believe that Lee Oswald was a vicious man. So I'd like to read you that. Now, Popeye, I know that you can give us the official story quickly, okay, that you can give us the official story of how Tippit supposedly died, okay? Well, yeah, supposedly he came across Lee, and as he stopped to talk to him, Lee shot him, and then took.
And he was in a police car, right?
Yeah, and then took off.
Yeah, and where was that police car located?
I don't remember the street exactly, but I know it was in the street. I know it wasn't like pulled off to the side. I know he had just kind of pulled up in the middle of the street.
It wasn't near the theater or anything, right?
Oh no, he was out in like suburbia.
Okay, now that's what. Eventually, that turned out to be the truth. I'm going to read you what the people heard the first time. When remember, Lee Oswald is standing in the lineups, and here's what comes out in the paper: policeman killed chasing suspect. That's the title. Okay, this is November 22nd. Listen to this: Police Captain Pat Ganaway today said a suspect held in the assassination of President Kennedy was an employee in the building where a rifle was found. Captain Ganaway said the suspect had visited Russia and was married to a Russian. This was not immediately confirmed. The suspect's citizenship was not known. Captain Ganaway said the suspect was the same man who shot and killed a city policeman in the Oak Cliff section of the city. Policeman J.D. Tippit, 38, was slain as he and fellow officer M.N. McDonald chased the suspect into a rear exit of the Texas Theater. According to police headquarters, Tippit fired a shot. McDonald rushed the suspect, and the suspect said, "It's all over now." So here I have Tippit firing a shot at Lee Oswald, okay, and McDonald rushing. McDonald and the suspect sprawled over a seat in the theater. McDonald's face was slashed. Police said it was a 4-inch gash. The suspect was seized. Guess who got the gash? Lee Oswald. He had the 4-inch gash on his face. So they're saying that McDonald captured him, but that Tippit was slain in the theater by Lee Oswald shooting at him. I mean, this is how they messed everything up,
Wow.
And, it's completely, of course, everybody thought that Lee Oswald killed Tippit in the theater. It didn't come out till later that it was way somewhere else, and it would even be hard for him to get to the theater.
I didn't even know that the initial reports had Tippit being slain in the theater. See, that's how they actually manipulate the story. You're right. That's a great example. Here
we have all this happening to Lee Oswald, and they're messing up what they're saying. They're even saying that, get this, in the same paper, Sheriff's Department said a rifle had been found in a staircase. That wasn't true either. On the 5th floor, okay, near the scene of the assassination. So they found this rifle, the rifle originally, they say here, on the 5th floor, yet later we find out it's in a sniper's nest on the 6th floor. It says it was a Mauser. The German-made Army rifle had, it had one shell left in the chamber, and spent shells were found nearby. So even in these original reports, it's on the 5th floor, where obviously that was impossible because we had people sitting, looking out the window there. So they had all this messed up stuff going on, and of course, among it all, people are completely confused, and yet it seems that Edgar Hoover's not confused because, of course, even when the FBI, just a few hours after Lee Oswald is arrested, they say, look, we've got this poster out there with black around it, says wanted for treason, Kennedy's pictures on it. We've got these people who have threatened Kennedy. Shouldn't we round them up and talk to them? And Hoover writes back, in his famous memo, not necessary, true suspect has been already arrested. And they don't even have the evidence yet in the FBI labs. Same day that Kennedy was shot, and only a few hours. And of course, Lee was arrested, as you know, only 69 minutes after the assassination, and it was at 1:40 p.m. And they write immediately his arrest report right on the spot and said this man, shot and killed President John F. Kennedy and wounded Governor Connolly, and he also shot and killed Officer J.D. Tippit. And they haven't even gotten him to the police station yet.
And then there's all the fake Oswalds, too, which...
there we go. And then on top of that, to confuse the people even more, especially these days, we have a flood of tips that rolled in. Oh, I saw Oswald here. I saw Oswald there. And if people take all these tips seriously and pile them up, then, you can start saying, oh, gee, how many Oswalds do we have? We know that there were people who were impersonating Lee Oswald in Mexico City. We know that near the end of his life we had impersonations, but that doesn't mean that he had impersonations all his life. When you have someone who is in the CIA, well, he was trained by the ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence, he told me so, and he was borrowed by the CIA. I've since then talked to some CIA personnel and former CIA, and they've told me, yeah, that's very typical. You borrow an operative, and then you're not responsible for what they do because they really belong to somebody else, you see. So you have all these layers upon layers of intrigue going on. Yeah, cloak and dagger stuff, and that includes creating a legend. That is, while Lee Oswald is in the Soviet Union, they're going to create, it looks like, all different kinds of eyewitness reports or anything else, okay? Some of them, maybe they would pick up. You can't look at reports that were brought in right after the assassination, but there are some records like Bolton Ford. You have somebody named Oswald who is linked to Guy Bannister's name, while Lee Harvey Oswald is over in the USSR. What you don't hear, there are two reasons why you could have had this document where they were trying to buy these, at Bolton Ford, buy these trucks, I believe it was, and you have Lee. It says Oswald. It doesn't even say Lee Harvey Oswald on it. There's just the word Oswald tucked in with Guy Bannister and somebody else who was trying to buy these vehicles. And that's supposed to be evidence, this name Oswald, that Lee Oswald, could have been in the USSR, or there must be two of them, one's Harvey and one's Lee and so on. What they don't tell you is that, like, even at Riley, there are Oswalds all over town. There were two Oswalds working at Riley, which had only 90 employees around, about 90 employees, okay? When Lee was there, so there were three Oswalds there. When Lee was there, one of them was a cousin, I think, but he didn't even talk to them. So you have another woman, a woman calls in, and she calls to Mrs. J.D. Tippit's, another Tippit who's a relative of J.D. Tippit, And she said, I've got to tell you something. This man, his uncle and his father, they're communists and they're Hungarian. This man was born a Hungarian, and, they are bad people, okay? So we have this researcher that picks it up and says, oh, here's evidence, that Lee Oswald, like Lee Harvey, he calls him Harvey, this man, he was raised as a Hungarian, and then he learned to speak Russian because they speak so much Russian in Hungary. What this researcher does not tell you is that John Pick, whom Lee Harvey, and his brother visited in New York, John Pick is his half-brother, visits him, and you find out John Pick's wife, his new wife, okay, they have a baby. His wife was born into a Hungarian family. It's her father who's Hungarian, her father who speaks Russian, and so on. But no, you don't hear that part. All you hear is that, Lee Harvey Oswald, he came from this Hungarian family, and he can speak Russian, and because he learned it from a childhood, and that's why he could speak it so well. When I watched Lee Oswald, and that's the Harvey, they say that's Harvey, see, I watched him struggling to always improve his Russian, because he had a strong white Russian accent, and he wanted to get it more perfected. When he was arrested, the police went to his rooming house, okay, where he had a room, there on Beckley Avenue, North Beckley. They go in there and they find a box of flashcards, and these are Russian flashcards, because he worked constantly, not just because, not that he didn't know a lot of those words, but he couldn't spell them very well. He was still learning how to spell. So the man who's supposed to have learned this from childhood, just because of an anonymous tip, is taken as fact. And they do this again and again. On top of that, you have legends. Lee told me that a number of times they had created some fake records, so if he came back to the United States and he was needed to stay there instead of go to Cuba or something like that. Because understand, as a so-called fake defector, I mean, he was a fake defector, but as a defector, as far as the public's concerned, pro-communist, he can easily then be transferred and say, I hate America. After all, now I'm going to leave again. I'm going to go to Cuba, and I'm pro-Castro. And, of course, all of that is not actually the truth at all. He was a fake defector. He pretended to be pro-Castro, so he could be used like that. Then it's all turned against him, you see, when they decide to use him as a patsy. Because they say, this guy, hated, he's communist and all. He never was a communist. Even in the USSR, he never took a communist card. Never did. So anyway, that's what's going on. I've looked at a lot of these records. Lee himself told me that some of the records were generated so that if he never was sent back to Cuba, he could point to that gap of 3 years in there that he was away. Okay, almost 3 years, about 2 3/4 years in the USSR. He had a couple of records that he was actually in this country. That doesn't mean there were two people. This is a legend. This is what they built so that he could be used in other ways. He doesn't have to refer that, oh, hey, I was in the USSR during this period of time. How is he going to do that if he's in some other kind of assignment? So they built up some fake records, and now they're using them to try and prove that there are two Oswalds. They did the same thing with his mother. Lee told me, oh, my gosh, he said, my mom has just aged so much. And I said, well, what's the matter? And he said, well, she has a thyroid condition, and her hair is falling out. And she's got, she's gained weight. She can't wear high heels anymore. She has to run around in slippers or in these, shoes. And she just looks awful. She's this age. And I went through a thyroid problem, and it aged me. My hair fell out, and I got fat in the face. Since then, I've gotten thyroid treatment and Synthroid, and all that. And I've lost a lot of weight, and I look good again. But she was declining. She is one of these many who are undiagnosed with thyroid condition. So then they're trying to say because she looks so different that we're talking about two Marguerites. Not only that, but Robert Oswald had to know both of them, and so did the Moretts. And Marguerite's sister had to know that there were two of them too. And it's just on and on like that. It's just ridiculous. But people look at what look like two different pictures. One's taken before she had her thyroid crash, and one after. Say it can't possibly be the right people. They haven't done their homework. The pupillary distance in the eyes are the same. You have the same eyebrow structure, the same bony structure. It's just that it's obscured because she's gained so much weight and so on, and she's aged so fast. Marguerite also didn't comport herself very well. The Marguerite that's supposed to be tall and handsome and all that, for some reason she's always losing her jobs and going from job to job too. And they have messed up records here and there, just like in the newspaper that I just read to you. You can have all kinds of alternative stories. You know darn well that J.D. Tippit never chased Lee Oswald into the theater and got shot in the theater, yet there we have it. And these kind of people who collect these records, they could have said, what, there are two J.D. Tippits? You see how it goes. So that's what we have to put up with. Thank God I know the real man. I know exactly when they produce these legends, and they have some of these people who are even posing as him later on. That was when they were actively framing him. It has nothing to do with these earlier records brought in by tipsters, or when actually they were creating just some fake documents to cover his, so he'd have something to cover the gap when he was in the USSR, because he was a spy.
It's an incredible story. It really is. And the level of, this whole thing is just, you can't take it at face value of what they told you about the Kennedy assassination, ladies and gentlemen.
No.
And Lee is not some crazy guy that went up in the book depository and got pissed off at Kennedy and decided to shoot him with a rifle that you couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with if you tried and you were standing 5 feet from it. Okay? It doesn't make any sense. The official story, just like most of their stuff, Judyth, never makes any sense, right? The official story usually is full of crap.
Thank God we have the internet, and people can see this for themselves, how they will even change a story. A good example is the Israelis, when this poor girl, she was protesting, and she was, we saw the film. She's standing in front of a bulldozer. The bulldozer, crushes her. You can see the house right next to it. You can see the people protesting, everybody lined up. You can see a lot. And so CNN plays this. Okay, then they talk to the guy. It's one of our is diplomats there from Israel, and the parents have just lost their plea that their daughter was murdered. They're saying, well, no, they couldn't see her, and besides, it wasn't anywhere near the house. That was just moments after CNN played the original thing, where you can see the house, you can see the people protesting, you can see that that they're moving forward and crushing her, and they're just saying they couldn't see her when they were screaming, and it was obvious. And yet he said right away, oh no, it wasn't even near the house. He lied right on top of it. It was so stunning to see that. They will state something that is not true to the public, even when you have filmed evidence and so on. It's amazing. But with the Internet, we now know. It's something dreadful to watch George W. Bush Sr., the Bush, not the shrub, okay? It's something else to watch him at Gerald Ford's funeral saying, a deranged gunman, and he smiles, killed Kennedy. And that smile gives it away. He knows darn well, and he couldn't even hide the smile, that it wasn't any deranged gunman at all, but it was an act.
Judyth, I got to ask you this because we got a few minutes before we go to break. Do you think
an act of treason?
Do you think Bush Sr. was involved in the Kennedy assassination in any way, shape, or form? Because I know you're a researcher of this yourself, of the assassination itself. You know a lot of stuff.
and you mustn't just take my word for it at all. You must look, if you're going to get serious about this, you have to look at everybody's claims. I am not going to stand forth and say who did this. I will say this. Any man who suddenly can become the head of the CIA and says, oh, I never was in it before, when you have all these records hinting that even on the day of the assassination, he says, we have a suspect over here, and then they say later that isn't Bush. Well, how did Bush suddenly get himself, appointed head of the CIA if he never had any experience? And then when you find out the records of experience that we have with the George Bush, and they say it's not him, begin at least with the Bay of Pigs, and the Zabata oil and all of this. You just have to use common sense. Now, if you don't have common sense, then go ahead and fight it. These people are not going to stand up and say, hey, I looked the other way when Kennedy was killed. I helped to cover it up because I knew I'd get more power. When I look at somebody like Gerald Ford, he's on the Warren Commission, and he moves the bullet hole up 4 inches, and his reward eventually is the presidency of the United States. Our very first president was appointed, and he was even appointed to be vice president. The Nixon administration is so corrupt, Nixon has to resign, but before that happened, his vice president, Spiro Agnew, had to resign. They bring in Gerald Ford, this interesting man who was funneling information to the FBI from the Warren Commission, on the Warren Commission, and admits, before he dies, he admits that he moved the bullet hole up that was in Jack Kennedy's back, moves it up to his neck so that Lee Oswald can be blamed. And our American people are going to stand for this and say, oh, what a nice man. We have to have our people wake up, or they deserve the people that they're electing.
Yeah, and Arlen Specter just died too, Mr. Magic Bullet.
Yeah, well, he's part of that two-man team. It was Specter and Ford, of course, that put together the magic bullet theory, and they want to call it the single bullet theory, okay? They want to call it the single bullet. And did I tell you what General Walker said about the magic bullet?
No, what did he say?
Well, here's the thing. He wrote to the Warren Commission and others. I don't know whether he wrote to single members or whatever. I'd have to look at the documents more. But here's what he complained about. He wrote several letters, so not just one, to other people too. He said, I was present when I was shot at, obviously. This was on April 10th, 1963, all right? And this is a few days before Lee will be leaving, a couple of weeks before Lee will be leaving for New Orleans. And he said, I picked up the bullet, I looked at it, all right? It was smashed on the end and so on. It's creased his head, okay? It's caused slight damage and landed in the wall. And anyway, he picks it up from the floor, looks at it, hands it to the police. He said, I handle this with my own hands. He said, I'm looking at the Warren Commission exhibit where you show the magic bullet and the bullet you say that was shot at General Walker. Okay, and it's kind of crushed compared to the magic bullet.
You know what, Judyth? I'm going to have to cut us off.
Copper-jacketed. They're copper-jacketed.
I'm gonna have you repeat that when we come back into the next hour, because we're gonna get cut off by the break. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. Time is just flying by. Stay tuned. Hour number 2 coming up. Do not go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com, and I am hanging out with my good friend, witness to the behind-the-scenes things that were going on, some of the things that were going on surrounding the Kennedy assassination, cancer researcher, just all-around wonderful lady, Miss Judyth Vary Baker. And I am excited to announce that for hour number 2, we have a special guest joining us, somebody who I'm going to be having back on it just by himself so I can pick his brain. Somebody that if you've ever seen The Men Who Killed Kennedy, you have seen him before. And as I said to him during the break, he was actually on Orion and didn't even realize it on Thanksgiving when we played The Men Who Killed Kennedy. Mr. Vince Palamara. Vince, welcome to the broadcast. It is an honor, sir.
Oh, great. Glad to be here. Yes, especially with you and Judyth. Great company.
It's like an all-star broadcast this evening in the JFK Assassination Research Circle here on Down the Rabbit Hole. So, Judyth, before we get into a few other things, because I want to pick your brain and I want to pick Vince's brain, we got cut off when you were talking about what General Walker was saying about the magic bullet. So let's start over again with the magic bullet, what you were saying about pertaining to what General Walker said about it.
General Walker wrote one very vehement letter to, you're talking about, to the government about complaining about the Warren Commission having an exhibit. And he was very adamant about the fact that, hey, that bullet was shot at me. It creased the top of his head. He handled it with his hands before he gave it to the police. He got a good look at it, and it was a steel-jacketed bullet, what was left of it, And here he says, you've got this, this Warren Commission exhibit, and it shows the magic bullet, copper-clad bullet. It's in color. Next to it, in color, is this copper-clad bullet smashed at the top from General Walker's house, okay? And he said, that's not the bullet. What's going on here? I handled that bullet. It was a steel-jacketed bullet. Now you've got it as a copper-clad. But of course, we have to have it copper-clad because, of course, the magic bullet that Lee Oswald was supposed to have shot out of that Mannlicher Carcano, okay? It's copper-clad, and so, of course, he shot at General Walker, so that's copper-clad, too. General Walker did not agree and said, you don't know what you're talking about. So people need to know these things,
I agree. And the magic, come on. Look, first of all, anybody that's ever even, I know, again, that the Zapruder film has been played with, but if you even see any of the film, you see Kennedy get hit first, then you see Connolly get hit. There is a break in between the two.
Clearly.
That shows there were 2 shots.
His bullet's supposed to stay there in thin air, and waited and then plunged into Connolly.
Hey, whenever I think of the magic bullet theory, the best visual I get is when Kevin Costner was playing Jim Garrison in JFK, and he's sitting there with the stick in his hand, and he's like, it hesitates in midair and then makes a turn, and he's showing you how insane it is, like with a visual. Vince, what say you?
I would say that you can't ricochet a bullet the way they're talking about without it hitting bone all the time. That's what makes it ricochet. It doesn't ricochet going through a watermelon, as you know. So when it ricochets on a hard surface and going in another direction, it's going to deform the bullet. And we have so many ricochets going on. They're just like the General Walker bullet that was all smashed up. There shouldn't have been anything left of the thing.
Well, it's like the bullet that hit Kennedy in the throat. And Vince, you're like I would say, you're an expert on the Secret Service and how there was a stand down and everything. And when you were in the episode of The Men Who Killed Kennedy, you were in I think it was called, if I remember correctly, The Smoking Guns. It shows how there was a shot from the front through the front windshield into his throat.
Right. Yeah. Doug Weldon, a good friend of mine, handled that particular aspect, but that's definitely part and parcel of my research, too, is that the Dallas police and a few Secret Service agents, when the limousine went to the White House garage that night, noted a small hole in the windshield. So not only do you have all the parking doctors saying that JFK was shot from the front, but you also have eyewitnesses, Dallas police and Secret Service, of a hole in that windshield, and it was a small hole. And now the official story is that there was no hole; it was just a crack from allegedly a rearward shot, like a ricochet from a bullet. But now they're saying there was a penetrating through and through hole that you could actually stick a writing pencil through. So right there, and then you get to the chain of possession of the so-called magic bullet. That's ridiculous. Then you get, the autopsy doctors, Humes and Boswell. No matter what they said about other things, they disavowed how they couldn't see how one bullet could have done that kind of bony damage. And then the late Dr. Shaw, who was Connolly's surgeon, was really adamant that there's no way he could see how this bullet, CE-399, could have done that. Yeah.
And this magic bullet, when you look at it, and they say, well, it is deformed. Well, it's a little smushed. But you'll see that there are some particles out of the top of it. Those little portions taken out of the top of it were actually used to analyze the composition of the bullet. And when you look at Connolly's x-rays, he has fragments of bullet that were removed from his wrist. His wrist was shattered. But they often don't tell you, there's also a piece of fragment of bullet in his thigh bone, all right? And it never was removed, and, of course, they refused to allow an autopsy on Connolly after he did die eventually. They don't want these pieces taken out. First of all, I doubt they would match anything like the composition of the so-called magic bullet. And on top of that, you mass all these pieces together, and it's a considerable amount of bullet lead we're talking about.
You know what a huge red flag for me is?
You just have the magic bullet itself simply couldn't have provided all those pieces of bullet.
The red flag with Connolly for me is when he said, there's a magic phrase that he said. And later on, it was challenged if he really said that or not. But he said, "My God, they are going to kill us all." They.
Oh yeah, he said it.
The key word being they. That would mean that there's more than one person, which by definition would give the term conspiracy a new, I guess, shine a new light on it in the and people would have to say, well, I guess really there was a conspiracy because by definition
we have a bullet wound in the back of Kennedy's back, which Ford himself recognized and moved up to, for the neck. That is from the back. Then we have the bullet that killed him. Okay, coming from the front. That is a conspiracy, and so anyone saying and to actually say that. To mention a conspiracy when you're talking about a sitting head of state, when in almost every case in history, it hasn't been one person, or that one person, deranged or whatever. This is something that is quite rare, and you always find out they're influenced anyway by somebody. They don't just come out of the woodwork and decide they're going to kill somebody. Of course, that's what they said about Lee Oswald. A man with no motive. They actually say it in the Warren Commission that they can't ascribe a motive to this man.
But it's crazy to think that the government would have a motive. Vince, what say you?
I have to add something onto the CE-399, the magic bullet, too. This is an official Warren Commission document in the Warren volumes. Richard Johnson, who was the agent who actually was given the bullet at Parkland Hospital before they left, Dallas. Well, when he was shown that bullet later, he refused to identify it. Chief James Rowley refused to identify it, and several other people in the chain of possession refused to identify it. So it's amazing. You would think it'd be a slam dunk. Oh, yes, this is the bullet that I recovered from Parkland Hospital.
I mean, it's important. I mean, it's the president's death.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. So, but you got to keep in mind, at the time, it was a very naive time.
And this is just one. Yeah. There's a heap. There is a mountain of problems like this throughout the entire 26 volumes, and it's it's amazing what is included and what is not. I'm not the only witness who wasn't included, you know. I mean, it's amazing how many people knew Lee Oswald and, you know, understood what kind of man he is, and yet they were never called to testify.
Right. You know, it was the time before investigative journalism, for, you know, everybody uses Woodward and Bernstein as a catchphrase now, but it was a naive time in America. Like my parents did something. They said, you know what, at the time, 50 people could have killed Kennedy. We were so devastated. The details went in one ear and not the other. And I think that's what they counted on.
Yeah.
Everyone was literally so shocked. You know, everybody believed everything like the divine word of God that came from the press and from, especially from the government. It wasn't until, you know, months and especially years later that independent researchers and authors found all these discrepancies. But by then, you know, the passage of time, the denials, more things came up in the modern world we lived in, and so on. And so it's been a struggle. You know, we're winning in the public opinion polls. We always have. You know, so that's the good news. With the bad
and we're
news
making progress. We really are.
Oh, yeah.
We're making
there's no
progress.
doubt, you know.
If they tried to pull this off now, things would be much different because there's more people that are tuned in.
I wonder because, I mean, you'd think they'd be much different, but what happened with Osama bin Laden? That's all I have to say about that.
No, you're right. No, good point, Judyth. Wow. See, that's why I love Judyth, because she comes out of left field and gives you a right hook of truth right across the jaw. No, that's a good point. And, you know, I guess to a certain degree they wouldn't be able to get away with it. I mean, to the point where people like Mae Brussel were, you know, look, she was forced off the air for a period of time, where now...
And dies of sudden cancer, by the way.
Yeah, that's it. And do you know what I found out? Because we air her stuff here on 5 nights a week. And after my broadcast for an hour, we air Mae. It's awesome. And you know what she was talking about right before she died, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, but it's interesting. The satanic ritual abuse, and what's his name, the Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aquino, and all this other stuff, and the which that dovetails into the mind control aspect and some really deep, dark,
I
horrific
really
things.
get concerned about mind control. One of the other things you hear is that, Lee Oswald must have had mind control, you know, and I have tried to explain to people, for example, you hear this thing, he could have regrown his tonsils, therefore it's got to be a different Oswald overseas. Lee Oswald had his tonsils removed when he was 5.5, and he had a mastoidectomy done. I think people need to hear this. He had a mastoidectomy done and healed, but it made a scar. Now, it doesn't make, when you have a scar in childhood, because I have one on my thumb, it almost cut my thumb off, this piece of glass did. And yet today it's only a little scarred. It doesn't even cross near the section of my thumb that it did before. In other words, when you get to be an adult, the childhood scar is smaller. Lee's mastoidectomy scar was not very big. Nevertheless, he wanted to hide it because, of course, it was an identifying scar. So what happened is, you see his records, in the military. He's all the time getting adenoiditis. He's getting somebody put tonsillitis, but he had pharyngitis. He had infections. They were getting ear infections. He was coming in and getting shots for that. And finally, in the USSR, he goes into the hospital in Minsk. And this is a week or two after meeting Marina, and he will marry her in only 6 weeks. 2 of those weeks he spent in the hospital. You don't spend 2 weeks in any hospital simply with getting your adenoids out. And that's what happened. He's in the hospital about 2 weeks getting his adenoids out. Well, it should have taken just a few days, and he should have been out of the hospital, even with an infection.
You're right. Yeah.
All right, now here's the thing, though. So people say, maybe he got himself an implant there, MK Ultra, and all this kind of thing. And here's Lee's telling me, by the way, at Sugi he had seen MK Ultra at work, and that they would put implants up their noses, and he'd tell me how they're all the time had runny, snotty noses because these things they weren't titanium or anything. They had some crude wiring system going on, and they got infections on. Lee never had a runny nose. I'll just put it that way. All right. He was laughing about some of the crudeness. So it's not so crude anymore. Per day, you probably could get an insect up your nose. It'd be one of these tiny drones, on a a different level, and it's going to go up. I mean, in other words, we're very vulnerable now to a very highly developed technology. But back then, Lee was actually in the hospital for several reasons. He was making contact, he told me, with a doctor there who was a spy for the United States. That's one thing. And he obtained information, so no matter where he moved, he would be able to get in contact with a spy system that was set up there. The second thing that happened to him is that doctor pulled the tissue behind his ear. You have a loose batch of tissue there. He actually pulled the small scar there up behind the ear and tacked it in. It was a plastic surgery thing that was going on, and by doing so, it got rid of what should have been a depression. When you do an operation in that area, you take out the mastoid process, it's called. Okay, it's part of the bone that juts out. You take that out, it leaves a depression. You can put your finger in it, and you can feel it. But when that skin was stretched, it's gone. So then he could probably write, which he did, I have no identifying scars. That despite the fact that he had 5 small stitches in his left wrist, okay, but they were hard to see. They really were. And when he told me, I rubbed walnut juice into it, he said, and browned it up so it was hard to see those scars on his wrist. So he called himself, he didn't have identifiable scars. And there was another scar on his elbow, near his elbow, I should say. But that, if he had his arm straight, you couldn't even see it at all because of the wrinkle in his arm and going down. You just wouldn't notice it at all. And during the autopsy, if during the autopsy he had rigor mortis, which is very possible, his arm would have been, we see his arms extended, and in that viewpoint, it'd be difficult to turn the arm. You would not notice probably that scar. So here we have, they're exhuming Lee Oswald's body because they think, wait a minute, there's no scar behind his ear. It can't be the guy. There's no scar on his wrist. They've got a tag attached to his left wrist, so you can't even, you could miss that tiny scar, that, the thin line scar that was made by a razor blade. You see what I'm saying? And so they exhume him, and they find a skull there with the mastoiditis in process. The mastoid process has been removed. And then they say, they must have replaced the head with Harvey's head and all this stuff going on. When you know the real man and you know what really happened to him, you almost have to laugh at these things, except, of course, researchers who don't know what they're talking about because they didn't know the man, they will take any kind of theory and blow it up. So you have all these theories going around, and it can really obfuscate the point. That's why witness testimony can be important and why we need to listen to witnesses who knew him, and especially if they were not like witness at Riley Coffee Company who said, oh yes, I remember Oswald well, because when there were breaks and everything, we'd take a coffee break, and he'd sit out there just staring into space, wouldn't talk to anybody, smoking a cigarette. Well, Lee didn't smoke. He quit smoking when he was early in the Marines, just like he quit drinking. So, it's easy for me to see who's telling the truth and who is not.
And there's a lot of disinfo put out there purposely to muddy the waters, so that way people, when they're researching it, it's like anything else. They put so much out there, and half of it's true, and then the other half is disinfo or misinfo, and it's done so that people researching it they get overwhelmed and they go, screw it. There's too much. And
exhausted on these news groups. I would say I've given up talking to news groups because I would make my point, and I'd show them that they're wrong. And you know what they do? I'd leave, and a few weeks later they bring it up again and say, look, Baker's not even answering us, something like that. It's just, in other words, you can go and tell some of these people the truth that if they're disinfo artists and they are out there on news groups, okay, there are trolls and everything, and they will, no matter what you give them, they will still ignore it and even repeat their accusation even after you've cleared the air there. It's really pitiful.
Judith, you could bring the shooter.
Forget the news groups, You
could bring the shooter. Right. There's always going to be a percentage of people where you could literally bring it doesn't. You could have videotape of the guy from like 80 different angles, whatever. You know what I mean? It would not matter. Yeah. They would deny it, right? Vince, what say you?
I agree, and I can second the motion about the news groups. It's an exercise in futility. It's a combination of well-meaning amateurs, some seasoned researchers, but by and large, as the years have gone by, I think it reached its crescendo like in the late 90s. There was some good work being done on there, but now it's just ridiculous. What you have there is personal attacks, people that purposely like to upset the apple cart and just actually, just really what it boils down to now is just personal attacks. I don't even go on news groups. It's not just me. It's anyone with any kind of name. Yeah, it really is. It's the best bet. The good news is the internet is fantastic for getting information out. It's really kept the case alive, to put it mildly. But as far as the specific news groups, I would say there's a couple that are good. They're moderated.
Right.
It seems like JFK Lantern's not bad, and the education forum's pretty good. John Simkin, but some of the other ones, was a JFK conspiracy that aren't moderated. Oh, stay away from them. They're just a deluge of, pardon the phrase, crap. I guess is the best way of putting it. There's a lot of stuff that's just beyond silly. And what it is, and that's what happens. The good news is the average person, like I was saying earlier, believes there's a conspiracy, so that's good. They're overwhelmingly on their side as far as the opinion polls, and we know the books sell, and there's an interest in there. But at the same time, I think people get weighted down because they believe there's a conspiracy, but like you were saying before, there's so many competing theories and interests. There's well-meaning people.
A lot of these are false. They will provide crazy things like Kellerman's Greer shooting Kennedy, and all kinds of things, and just messing everybody up, Oswald in the doorway, whatever they, you can't prove these things, really. You can try, you can put out your theories, but what we have to understand, when we understand that Lee Oswald was innocent, and he was. Once you understand that, you must turn your attention. We don't have to worry about who killed Kennedy and shot at him, but when we know who did not, then we can look and say, who allowed this to happen? Why did they cover it up? Because, of course, they slammed Lee Oswald. And it's so blatant now. You can see so obviously how that he was innocent. And so much more information has come out. So once we know that Lee Oswald is innocent, then we must say, let's put some flowers on Lee Oswald's grave. All right? Let's do something to get this man out of the pit of hell that he's been placed in by, in public opinion. Once he's not demonized anymore, you have to turn your attention to the efforts of the government to fool us.
I agree. Judyth, I'm going to cut us off because we got a break sneaking up. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard what Judyth just said. If you're in the area, go to Lee's grave, place some flowers on it, take a picture of it, put it up on Facebook.
They take them away right away, so you have to take a picture.
We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment coming up. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back for the final segment this evening. And before we get into it, because Judyth's going to touch on the weaponized cancer end of things really quick, I want both Judyth and Vince to have a chance to promote their stuff, and I will let everybody know what date within the next few days, probably Sunday when I come on air, because I'll have it figured out off air with Vince. Vince is going to be coming back on for at least 2 hours with me, probably multiple times, because he's a really intelligent guy, and I want to pick his brain on the JFK assassination and a ton of other things. So I have a feeling he's going to be a frequent guest here on Down the Rabbit Hole. So stay tuned for that.
Sounds good.
And
sounds good. Yep.
Yeah, you're gonna be getting you're gonna be coming on a lot, Vince. I'm gonna be bringing you on quite often. And actually,
I'm so pleased. That's great.
Chris, I have to give Chris over at Trine Day a shout out. He actually gave me some info today, ladies and gentlemen. The other day, I had said that when I was playing audio from Don Adams, that he was passed away, because both Joe Joseph, who interviewed him years ago, and myself were under the impression that he had passed away. I am pleased to hear that that is not true, and I'm going to be working on getting Don on the broadcast as well. So that actually made me happy today. That was like something that brightened my day to find out that he's still with us. I was actually, like I was saying off air to you guys, I was like a kid in a candy store when I found out that he was still alive.
But he could use some help. He could use some serious help. His house burned down a few weeks ago, started in his documentary library, okay? And he is in real dire straits right now.
Do you know how anybody can help him out, Judyth? Is there a contact anybody can get to him?
I think if they just contact Chris Milligan, Chris can get help to him.
All right, so go to Trine Day. What's Chris's email over at Trine Day?
That would be publisher@trineday.net.
There you go. And email him and tell them that you want to help him out. I am so pleased to hear that he is alive. And I believe he actually even was publishing a book, or has published a book as of recent. With
Trine Day. Yes, with Trine Day.
Which makes me wonder why the fire started in his research lab.
We do too.
So,
Yeah.
all right, before we...
Although I've been through so much myself, I'm not even surprised,
Before we forget, I want you to plug your site. First, go plug your site and where people can get your book, Me and Lee.
Okay, meandlee.com. That's pretty easy, and it really is important to also for people who want to know more about what happened to Lee is go to Judyth Baker, Judyth Baker, blogspot.com, and there are about 50 essays there showing how Lee was basically framed and more information about him. Also, we take I like Facebook people. We've got everybody from movie producers to people who are witnesses who have come there, and of course, it's wonderful to get like Jerry Hemming's relatives, things like that. We have a lot of people on Facebook who have providing each other information, and together we've made a real impact. In fact, for one person put an ad saying, when you do a search on me, it says Judyth Vary Baker, and then it says under there, this is from Wiki, the Wiki's doing this, it says Judyth Vary Baker hoax, Judyth Vary Baker debunked. And then some people are going to think, and that's libelous. But if you actually go to and click on Judyth Vary Baker hoax, you find out almost all of it says she's not a hoax, and the same for debunked. So it's interesting how they're choosing these words instead of saying Judyth Vary Baker, Oswald's alleged lover, if you want to put it that way. But no, they're not using lover, they're not using witness, they're using hoax and debunking. So we have this kind of thing to fight on the internet.
Yeah, the trolls are out there, and Judyth, the information that you bring forward is pretty powerful. That's why you get attacked the way you do. Vince?
Well, the cancer industry, and, we just want to mention, of course, everybody out here should understand that when you have an option before you as someone who's going to run a business, and your options are like this. If you invent a light bulb that never burns out, you're out of the light bulb business pretty soon, because you're not going to make any money if the light bulb doesn't burn out. Well, if you're in the cancer treatment business, you do not want to cure cancer. Curing cancer, if you use some of the methods that I advocate, that they should go down the virus road, the virus vaccine road, like they've done with the human papillomavirus, right? If they would just go ahead and do that, for example, using bacteriophage, and engineering those wonderful viruses, if they would do something like that, we probably could cure cancer in a matter of a few years. Well, I'd say 10 years at the most. And these would be soft tissue cancers. And instead, of course, when you do something like that, it costs maybe $3,000 or $4,000 to cure cancer, and the virus stays in your body. It's like a vaccine. If your cancer would try to return, it would pop into action again and get rid of it again. So that would be a cure. But put that up against contrasting a whole industry where you have huge machines that are spewing out X-rays, and you've got fancy billion-dollar chemotherapeutic research centers, where they're churning out these drugs, and they're toxic, and they poison the system, but they will shrink the cancer. And only a few kinds of cancer do they actually cure it. You have some breast cancer and leukemia examples where you do have it. But unfortunately, for the large amount of patients, clients, what happens, of course, is they're simply treated with this toxic substance, and it causes these cells to shrink. It does not kill them, and after a while they become, of course, immune to it, and then they sprout up again, and then there's nothing, and these poor people have been weakened. Their whole immune system has been weakened, and the cancer then rages through their body, and then you find out, they did the chemotherapy, and they died, and of course their hair is out and everything else. This primitive, and I'm standing against it. If we had focused on curing cancer, instead, we wouldn't have built up this huge industry with not only, as I said, X-ray machines and these pharmaceutical companies, but we have whole hospitals dedicated to treating cancer instead of curing it. So, and of course, people think when they're getting treated for cancer, they'll be cured. Well, good luck. Some will be. We have in this country, it really upsets me, a report if you have survived 5 years. Now, is that cancer-free or is that just survival rate? They're often people are confused by this. If you're alive and you've had cancer and you're still alive after 5 years, that's considered some kind of a success in our country. I'm going to put that in contrast with Sweden, where you have to be cancer-free for 10 years before they report that, you're a statistic. So when you go and contrast the statistics, say, it looks like they have the same rate of cure in America compared to, like, Sweden. Better look at how they put their statistics together. What we do know is a considerable amount of money is being made in the cancer treatment industry, and I consider it unconscionable, just like I consider it unethical to have for-profit hospitals. Whoever thought that you could go and treat someone cheap as possible, okay, and make as much profit as possible off that person's agony. And we consider this ethical. It's disgusting. It should be against the law to have a for-profit hospital. We are so used to everything being translated into money. And as I said before, imagine my friend George was cured of cancer, and they got it out, and he has no recurrence after a whole year. He's working now, and it cost him $1.25 a day in Sweden to get his cancer treated. Actually, that was $1.25 a day that he spent renting a TV set in the hospital, okay? They have a 35% or 36% tax rate over there, all right? Sounds pretty bad, maybe. But they don't pay anything for it. When you put the health insurance costs, okay, against a 35% tax over in Sweden, that covers everything. Free college education, for example. They get free cancer treatment. They have all the security. 9 million people. Why in the world can't we do something like that in America, the country I love?
Because, Judyth, curing cancer is not profitable, and besides, it doesn't fit in with their overall agenda. It doesn't fit in with that agenda, and you put on top of that the fluoride and what's going on in the skies. You understand what's going on in the GMO and treated foods, and now they're fooling with the genome. I want to give you a concept. It's called the feral genome, F-E-R-A-L, feral. You know what that means? Like as in like feral, as in like feral cat, like outside, like natural nature?
Yes, it means it's a wild genome. It means leave the human genome alone. Quit poking with it, quit fooling with it, quit trying to make it better, because we are headed for what I call the beehive society, where you're going to go and make most people conform to a certain genetic type, and that means it'll be easier to treat them, easier to handle them, of course, easier to make sure that you don't have dissent, easier to have willing workers, and easier, of course, to keep people under control. That's what's in our future, and if people don't, they need to understand, leave the human genome alone. We should have the right to deny access to our genetics, all right, and our DNA. And unless we have that protection, we're going to have standardized, homogenized populations that will conform to whatever the powers that be wish them to do, including working without complaint. You just get rid of the dissenters. Just get in there and throw in a gene manipulator and make sure they conform. It sounds like science fiction. It's right around the corner.
Judyth, I got to ask you a question, and I know I've asked you this before on air. And ladies and gentlemen, you can go to get into detail, which Judyth and I have. You'd need a ton of time. You can look up, if you go to my archives, just look up my previous interviews with her. One from December of last year we did. It aired in December. We actually recorded it in Thanksgiving of last year, but I aired it a couple weeks later in December, and the beginning of December, and it was strictly about weaponized cancer and her research and everything. And I urge you to go listen to it because it's in depth and it's insane. But and she says, I asked her the same question, which I already know the answer to, but I'm going to ask her again just because she's live right now. Judyth, if you had been given the opportunity with the funds that were coming in to support this research, could you have cured cancer?
Could I personally have cured cancer? I certainly would have had access to a team. If I had worked with that team, we could have cured cancer.
Bam.
And I have been recently approached by some people through this tour that we're doing, okay? I can't tell you how many people are being galvanized when they hear the truth. And we have some serious interest now. I may be able to get back into a lab. If so, I promise you I will do something to help.
Wow, that's exciting to even hear that. I didn't know that. See?
It is, yeah.
That's awesome, Vince. What's your take? I know you know more than just you're. That's why I want to have you back on, because I'm going to be picking your brain unmercifully. But you know about the weaponized cancer, and from someone who I've never asked this question before, I'll ask you right now live on air. What's your take on the weaponized cancer? You see so many of these different witnesses suddenly coming down with cancer fast, and like Judyth said, she even brought up a good point. Mae Brussell, bam! All of a sudden, she gets a fast-acting cancer, and she's out of here. Yeah,
I tell you what, it definitely makes you think he's going no further than Jack Ruby. I mean, his death was unbelievable. How quick he went, and I don't know how I can. Judyth did a really good job explaining that. I mean, it's one thing, coincidences happen. That's why they call them coincidences, and I understand that, there's going to be, a rate of attrition. People pass away as the years go by, but sometimes you just got to say to yourself, wait a minute now, this is just too much. A lot of these people that passed away through cancers, and then you get into so-called accidents and that, and it just makes you think that there's got to be more to it than meets the eye. And, I tell you what, that's really exciting when I heard Jude talk about the book tour where it may inspire her to do more with cancer research. That's great. I hope.
It has. We've had some tremendous response. You're going to hear more about all this, I think, eventually. I had to get out this time because I'd received so many darn veiled threats. If I come out 2013, oh my! So I had to apologize to Popeye because I wasn't going to speak out again. I don't get a thrill out of this. This ruined my life. I'm on this tour. I can't even see my family here because I don't want anybody to know where my family lives. And I've got one son that hasn't talked to me since 1999 when I first spoke out. I mean, this has been hard for my family. But there comes a time when I'd be a coward if I hadn't spoken out.
Judyth, dear, you never have to apologize to me for anything. And what she's talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is because we did a big 6-hour interview, and it was originally going to be the last interview Judyth did until 2013 when she came here, and then she was going to show up at Dealey Plaza. There was a lot of people that were going to show up and back her up, and people were going to pass out DVDs and her book and everything else, and she got threats. So her coming to the States in 2012, and people have asked me, hey, Popeye, I thought she wasn't speaking until 2013. Well, it was better for her. It was safer for her, and the information had to get out there. So it's not about me. It's not about an interview that I did with you. It's about the information you're bringing to the table, my dear. You never have to apologize to me for anything, so don't you ever worry about that.
Well, God bless you all, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. Yeah, I hope people go to meandlee.com, get the book, and most important, look at it with an open mind. You've been overwhelmed with a lot of disinformation, the average person has been. And then they're saying, well, why is it important? How does it affect today? It definitely does. The people in power today didn't get there by accident. How much voice have the people had? As I said, the reason I use the Swedish example so much, you got more than 80% of the people voting. They have like 5 major parties, about 25 minor parties and all that, and they have to compromise and get the voice of the people. We really didn't have much choice this year again. Ron Paul, forget him, doesn't matter how many delegates he brought to the table, none of them would have been able to sit down at that table. And so it's kind of rigged, and people, if they're very bright, they notice this, and if they're not very bright, they're not going to notice anything anyway, So we've got to reach people who are still thinking, who are going to maybe be movers and shakers in the future. And if they get the information, I hope they get outraged. I hope they say, I want my country back. They don't even know what our country was like anymore. They don't know how many freedoms they've lost. But I'm praying that they will take a look.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, I know people are, like I said to you, I get at least 1 or 2 messages a day, whether it's a comment on one of the YouTube videos or an email or something I posted, an older article. There's at least 1 or 2 a day on one of the older interviews I've done with you in the past, and people are still amazed. Wow. Or somebody that went and got your book because they heard the interview a while ago, and maybe they just finished the book like 4 or 5 months later, and they're just absolutely blown away. Just completely blown away. Judyth, you have rewritten history my dear. I don't know if you realize the effect that you've had. You have completely rewritten history. You have done something that these...
Telling the truth, you know what? The truth grows. The truth that cannot... They haven't been able to stop this. They tried, and they can't. And my conduct through the years, I mean, I've been consistent, and even a researcher doesn't like me who's known me for a long, long time says he's never changed his story. You know, of course, if you didn't know me, you might hear things that just weren't so. But the fact of the matter is I've been consistent. And when I mentioned things like in 2003 in the documentary, I mentioned that, you know, that this was a big event, that is the Kennedy assassination. Then you have St. John Hunt. He gets the recording from Hunt in there. His father, you know, CIA guy associated with the assassination of Kennedy, calls it the big event. Well, I've had this happen again and again and again, where things I said, you know, later it's come out that it's exactly the way it happened. And as more evidence and more witnesses come forth, you know, I'm not getting the flack I used to get at all. People are starting to listen. When they do, they're going to understand. Once you understand, as I said, if Lee Oswald is innocent, then you must figure out who needs to be punished. You need to understand we still have these people among us, because every time you see a well-financed thing like by Gary Mack or any of these other people, okay, it's well-financed. Who's financing it? Who's doing it? Sixth floor museum, so on and so forth. All of this is so well regulated and organized, but the people can't be fooled forever. How can you keep having one special after another showing Oswald did it, and the next year they have to come out with another one? They're not convincing the people anymore. It's a waste of time. Anybody with more than a double-digit IQ can tell that Lee Oswald's innocent. I haven't done this so much as the Internet has brought out information that supports what I have said in the past, and it's confirmed it. And that's why people are believing me.
Well, like I said, you've helped rewrite history, Judyth. That's awesome. And ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to read her book. I've told you 100 times. I'll tell you 100 more starting right now. meandlee.com. You have to read her book. And then, like I said, as a follow-up to her book, I would suggest you read Ed Haslam's book, Dr. Mary's Monkey. And it's a 1-2 punch. It's a left-right, and you'll be out.
And then JFK and the Unspeakable. Because
that's a great book, too. And that explains, you know what, that's a good point, too, Judyth. Really quick, ladies and gentlemen, that book, JFK and the Unspeakable, in there, you'll understand kind of why they're demonizing him today in the media. Because eventually, the basics of it is the truth is going to come out eventually, to the point where rather than just let the truth come out and everything be known, they'll say they're going to frame it so that, well, Kennedy was a dirtbag anyway, so he kind of deserved to get what he got.
They have to go to character assassination now. You know,
exactly.
Kennedy was no angel, but he loved his country. He did not have to become president. He was independently wealthy. He couldn't be bought off, and neither could his little brother. And don't you know, they had to shoot him, and they had to shoot them both.
Yeah.
Vince?
True.
We got we only got a few minutes left with both of you. In fact, we have about a minute and a half left.
It's Vince's turn.
I'm going to have you both. I'm going to have you guys say. I'm going to have you guys say bye on air and everything, and plug your stuff. But before, don't hang up, because I'll say goodbye to you guys off air. But Vince, I want you to plug any websites and any YouTube and stuff you have really quick.
Okay. Well, the easiest way to find me is just Googling my name, Vince Palamara, Palamara, is if you go to vincepalamara.com. I have a pretty extensive blog and some subsidiary blogs where I have a lot of photographic evidence, videos, articles, so forth, because I've interviewed 80-plus former Secret Service agents that protected Kennedy, Johnson, actually from FDR up to the present time, but mainly obviously during the Kennedy-Johnson years, and that's been my focus. And I have to say something. Yeah, Me and Lee, I think it's a tremendous book. I have to say, I know hey, Vince, it's your turn to talk about yourself, but hey, Judy, your book is fantastic. I really, really, really like it. So I just had to throw that in there.
Well, thank you so much, Vince.
Yeah. My pleasure. But, I hope that, come on again. And, my focus is on the Secret Service, and very easy to find on the Internet. And, I've been in a lot of other people's books, here and there, whether it's a few pages to a few paragraphs to a couple chapters, all points in between. In fact, funny enough, I'm on page 536 of Judyth's book, too.
You see how everything dovetails together, ladies and gentlemen? Guys, we are out of time. Vince, thank you so much for coming on. Judyth, Thank you so much, my dear. As always, it is a pleasure and an honor.
Well, God bless you, and God bless America, and God bless Vince. So, take care, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for tonight. I will see you all again on Sunday. Until then, no fear, only love. I love you all. We are out of here.